Hi, I'm Jamie. This is Dead Dodge Garage, and this is a 1955 Imperial, which is slowly returning to the Earth. Suddenly, it's 5.5 hours in the future, because reasons. But I got about 2 hours left, so I'm gonna head down into the content mine and see what we can pull off here, just for you. Oh, there she is. 1955 was an interesting year at Chrysler Corporation. All across the board, the cars were clean sheet designs. The roof lines were lower. They had so much more character than previous years. Virgil Exner had signed on in the design studio a couple of years prior, but 55 was the first year his influence could be seen across the board. If you've watched any videos on this channel at all in the past, you probably already know that I prefer Chrysler products from the muscle car era. Mid-60s to early 70s, that's where my primary interest lies. Now sure, I've dabbled in cars outside of that range. It wasn't too long ago I revived a 57 Belvedere convertible on the channel. And even a couple 80s Chrysler products made their way to the channel lately. But what you might not know is outside of that muscle car range, my favorite year of Chrysler product is 1955. Almost a decade ago now, I made a deal to take possession of my first 55, a Chrysler New Yorker Deluxe sedan, almost identical to the Imperial sedan you see before you, although there are several important differences. We'll get to that in a minute. I absolutely loved the lines, the little details on that 55 car. That's what made me fall in love with the 55 Chrysler C300. To this day, I still want one, and I haven't managed to pull that off. It's one of few dream cars on my list that I've never owned. A few years later, I made a deal on a 55 Plymouth Plaza four-door sedan. That one had a flathead six-cylinder and a 3 on the tree. I daily drove that car for quite a while. It was pretty fun. I did decide at some point that since I've had a Chrysler and a Plymouth, I need to own a four-door 55 Dodge and a DeSoto. And I suppose, to round the lot out, an Imperial. You will have noticed that I called this an Imperial, not a Chrysler Imperial. The Chrysler name was removed from this car after 1952? Somewhere in there. And they were just Imperials. Until the end, essentially. Although they did at one time in the early 70s say Imperial by Chrysler on the trunk lid. Anyway, given my dedication to eventually at least briefly own every 55 Chrysler sedan, imagine my surprise and delight when this thing showed up in that collection that Tom bought over in Spokane with the Superbird. I have not bought this car. I probably won't buy this car. And the main reason for that is, well, money, space, and time. But the other is, it's not quite as good as it looks. You see, those giant chunks of trim, they hide a lot. Yeah, she's a little rough around the edges. Super cool car, but yeah. I've always liked this detail. Pretty cool. I recently did a 3-hour-long live stream with Uncle Tony on his channel, where we tried to figure out why Mopar guys are so weird. I don't know if we ever got to the bottom of that. We also discussed how these 50s cars smell different than the later ones, and there are some important reasons for that. Definitely the materials used in here are quite a bit different than the later cars. Something about mohair? Anyway. There's also the baby poop smell that emanates from these steering wheels as they start cracking. I don't know what this material is. It predates plastic, so yeah. Someone said bakelite or bakelite, however the heck you say that. I don't think this is that. I don't know what it is. I do know the steering wheel shouldn't do this, but we're not going to worry about that for now. One of the coolest things that was found in 1955 Chrysler products only is this dash-mounted shifter. This was called Flight Control. It's a shifter for the 2-speed Power Flight automatic transmission. Note, there is no park position. Park is over here. That's actually a tail shaft brake. I'm not going to try this one yet. There's a 120 mile an hour speedo. Also an odometer that says 65,618. That's only slightly more than my 55 Chrysler had. I'll tell you right now, given the way cars were serviced in this time, that doesn't mean what you hope it will mean. You've got your heater controls over here under the speedometer. You've got your 4-pod gauges here, fuel, oil, temp, and amps. I had a commenter recently insist that this is called an ammeter. Yeah, it is, but Chrysler never labeled it as that. At least as far as I'm aware. It was labeled amps, alt, alternator, but never ammeter, so anyway, do with that info what you will. You've got all kinds of other controls over here. headlights, panel lights, wipers, map dome. Huh, that's cool. And your cigar lighter, which is really nifty. Then you've got your old tube radio here, which might be stuck on. Anyway, cowl vent control, which doesn't work. And there's a clock over here that your passenger gets to read. On the 55 Plymouth dash, there's actually an important gauge over there. I can't remember if it's oil pressure or temperature, but you pretty much can't see it from the driving position. Anyway, here's the glove box, which is locked. Or maybe it's just stuck. Yeah, okay. Here's the last registration, which is still sitting in that glove box. Issue date 4 of 86 is for the license plate. I'm assuming that's when he bought it. That's just a few years after the Superbird, I think. And the last registration expired 3/10/1995. Note, this is an Imperial. So it says Imperial right here, which is really nifty. Also, power seats, which I can almost guarantee won't work. It also has power windows, which I can almost guarantee won't work, especially by the time I'm done playing with the switches. Also, there are little crowns everywhere, which is pretty nifty. You know, there might have been a critter issue. It's always a good sign when wiring was pulled apart decades before you get to a car. I think these are all for the power windows, judging by the fact that there's like a breaker pack here and it says front and rear. I didn't even notice that it has a trip meter, and the control actually does something. Ah yes, notice the wheel says power steering on it. If I remember Chrysler's propaganda from 55 correctly, I think this was the first year to have a modern type power steering unit. There is a pile of spare parts in here, including wheel cylinders, which is good because these are special. For one thing, there are 4 of them in the front. Oh, get out of there. There you go. It's like half of what you expect a wheel cylinder to be, and it mounts with this giant ear. I can remember looking for these things for the other 55s on the internet and being disappointed. Did I mention there are crowns on everything? Well, there are. Even the seat covers. Pretty cool. Also, do you think there was a bit of a moisture intrusion issue? Now, I know I said a minute ago that this is the same body as a 1955 Chrysler New Yorker, and essentially it is, but as mentioned, there are a good few variations from that car. Here's a very important one, the grille. That is special. The New Yorker has like a half-height grille and then an extra grille opening below that. The Imperial got this tall, full-face egg crate pattern grille. I don't know, it's a pretty cool piece. Incidentally, the C300 for 55 and 56 got that same grille. The body may be about the same, but the suspension is not. Note, this has a special bolt pattern. I believe it's 5 on 5 inches compared to the rest of the car's 5 on 4.5 pattern. That is attached to bespoke suspension that is only found on the Imperial. That suspension is attached to an engine cross frame that is different than a New Yorker. And I know that because the cross frame was rusted out on my 55 New Yorker, and I sourced one from a 55 Imperial and welded it in there. All of the bolt holes on the Imperial cross frame were larger. Figure that one out. Admire these full wheel covers. I believe these are correct for the 55. They're certainly Imperial pieces in any case. See the vents? Behind those vents, you can see vents in the steel wheels. Brake cooling. Wow. Also, there's a valve extension so you can fill the tire because the wheel cover sits out so far there's no way you could reach a standard valve. Here's a look at that special wheel with the hubcap removed and without the valve extension. Note the holes. A cool part of any old machine like this, the vent windows, or smoker windows, of course. But this car has them on the front and the back, so it's twice as good. Of course, the New Yorker has that too. That's not the point. Special Imperial gun sight taillights. Super cool, but also kind of weird, because doesn't it seem like the light should be there? Well, it should be, but they felt the need to put it up there on the Imperial. Also on the passenger side, the fuel filler neck is hidden in the trim piece surrounding that taillight. The bumpers front and rear are also Imperial specific. I mentioned the grille was reused on the 300, but the front bumper wasn't. The front bumper on the 300 was from the low-line Chrysler Windsor, or whatever their cheapo car was in 55. Anyway, this back bumper is a special piece. Note, there are lights. I assume those are reverse lights, but below those, dual exhaust exits. Of course, because all kinds of horrible chemicals and moisture are constantly exiting the exhaust and gathering right here, these bumpers rust to pieces. This car did come with a replacement for this driver's side, but even the replacement is not in the best of shape. Let's see if the trunk opens. Ow! That's stabby. Why is that like that? Anyway, it does open, and there kind of is a trunk. Admire the original liner material that's just kind of gross. I'm not sure what these covers are for. Maybe to make shock replacement easier? I don't know if you could tell or not, but this car has been repainted. There are signs of that on some of the trim and rubber gaskets and that sort of thing. That's probably why it's so chalky looking. Look at this. There's the original horrible salmon paint on the inside of the trunk lid, and that is in very nice shape. Wow, this thing's supposed to have a trunk light. The bulb is gone, but how cool is that for 1955? Spare wheel, again the vented type, very nice. I think there would have been a spare tire cover. Oh, you probably also could have just taken one look at this and realized the car was painted. I think they skipped like primer, among other things. I can't believe I've made it this far into looking at this car, but I haven't said the words forward look yet. 1955 is the year that whole thing kicked off at Chrysler. Again, spearheaded by Exner, these cars were supposed to look like the future. Chrysler's advertising lingo denoted the 55s as the $100 million look. I've only ever seen one advertisement that said forward look. But if you tell forward look enthusiasts that forward look did not start in 55, they get really mad at you, so I'm just going to go ahead and agree that it did. Having said that, compared to, say, a 1957 Plymouth, this 55 model is subdued. Straight, simple lines, no giant crazy fins. The front end is, well, I'd say tasteful. It's just not so Exner. By 61, when this Saratoga was built, things were very interesting. I actually think this is a really cool car. I think most forward-look cars are. I think I've babbled about the outside of the car enough. Time to look under the hood and see what treasures wait beneath. Oh, yeah, it's one of those things. This is the 1955 Chrysler Firepower 331 single 4-barrel engine, colloquially known as the first generation Hemi. Of course, at the time Chrysler was producing these engines, they didn't call them a Hemi. This was known as the dual rocker engine, or simply Chrysler's V8. If you know anything about top fuel dragsters, then you probably know a thing or two about the original Firepower Hemi. This was a pretty fantastic design with lots and lots of power potential. In this car, in its original factory form, that potential wasn't exactly realized. I don't remember what the horsepower number for this car is, but it's well below 300, let's just say that. Of course, the 300 moniker on the 55 Chrysler 300 was supposed to denote 300 horsepower, cranking out of the dual quad 331 dual rocker engine. Whether it actually made 300 horsepower or not, well, it's probably up for debate. This is not the first 331 I've featured on the channel. That distinction belongs to a 53 Imperial, which I called a limo. People are still correcting me about that, and it's been like a year. Compared to that earlier 53 two-barrel engine, this thing should be a bit more exciting, but again, still not a powerhouse by any means. Wow, there's actually liquid in there. Okay, yeah. Oil's almost full. Smells like oil, only slightly dirty. Oh, this is cool. Just found an original inspection stamping. That one says, okay, trim, 13. There are several others up here, a couple that say paint, and one that says, okay, final, 12. I noticed the stamp because I was looking at this. You may recognize this as a 67 and later dual circuit drum brake master cylinder and later booster. Compared to what would have been on this from the factory, that's a good setup. And the fact that there's actually some fluid left in it gives me hope for the brake pedal to do something. Unfortunately, I can tell you, I crawled in this thing in Spokane in spite of the horrible smells, and that brake pedal is rusted solid, so more on that in a bit, I guess. My original 55 New Yorker sedan had like 59,000 miles. It might have been 56,000 miles. Part of the deal for that car was I had to pull the engine out and give it back to the guy, which sucked because I got it fired up and drove it around the block, and it was pretty cool. It did tick though. It didn't necessarily run the best. When I got the engine out, I pulled the valve covers and they were completely, horribly coated in nasty carbon deposits. Because it turns out oil changes weren't really a thing that people did in 1955. Well, it doesn't look totally horrible down there. What do you think my chances of having a working carburetor are? Well, if you said low, you win a prize. The choke is seized solid too. Oh, the linkage moves, just not what it's attached to. This is quite interesting because as far as we know, this thing has been stored inside since the 90s. This might not be easy. Before I get too excited about the seized carburetor, I should probably find out if this engine turns at all. Luckily, it does have a solid fan. I've already reached down and grabbed it once. That was before we ever loaded the car. And I couldn't get stuff to happen. So I'm gonna mess with this for a minute. Oh, there it goes. Nice. Okay. Yeah, this thing's gonna be a runner. No problem. I am noticing something not super ideal down here. There's an idler pulley that moves a lot. Like the whole bracket is deflecting. We've got a shot here. Crankshaft turns. I'm gonna see about unseizing the carburetor, and then I suppose we can throw some kind of battery in this thing, see if any of the electrical stuff works, and then find out if the starter's still winning with us. I packed the trunk of the car with all kinds of useful stuff, but I didn't grab penetrant spray for some reason. All right, walking 100 feet, both directions. You may or may not know that we were actually planning to revive some of these cars in Spokane when we picked them up. Unfortunately, well, we didn't have enough time. We ended up being there for an entire extra day, and that wasn't enough time. Tom actually had to go back and get more parts and move cars. It was supposed to be called Rapid Fire Revivals, and it would have been awesome. Anyway, I'm going to use a house beater to carefully massage the various components on this carburetor and see if I can get it to do that thing we like. You know, carburate, I guess. Wow, the needles are even stuck, and there is a piece of linkage missing. We don't have an accelerator pump rod. That's going to be a problem. Dude. Wow. Yeah, the vacuum piston is like rusted solid, so that's cool. This early type of carb is called a WCFB. That means something. Well, I know the FB, well, and the C, come to think of it. This one might be garbage. Like total garbage. The only other ones I'm aware of anywhere around here are on Tom's dual quad poly setup, and I don't think he wants me parting those out. More spray, I guess. Oh yeah. This is unfortunate. Yeah, I don't know. That piston in the middle just isn't willing to budge. All right, I'm gonna turn the camera off and fight this thing for a while. We'll see what happens. All right, it's definitely still junk, but I did get the primary blades to open. They don't really close afterward. Oh, don't do that. Oh, the linkage is free, that's good. It's got a big whiff of tree sap for some reason. My New Yorker sat in a yard in Western Washington for decades. And that carburetor never seized like this. Never had any issues at all, in fact. Got the secondaries working. They're actually vacuum controlled on this. The primaries are still sticky. It moves, but that's not great. I don't want to hang this thing wide open. That would be not good. One forever later, we've got this. Yay! I'm so excited. Moving on. Pulling out the world's most ancientest 6-volt battery, which also happens to be giant. I pulled the hold down off, and for some reason, half of the hardware fell down there into a dark hole where I will never recover it from. 60% of the time, it works every time. Thank you. Oh yeah, I wanted to point this out. It's a chunk of like jean material, and it's sitting under the power steering pump, which, if you haven't noticed, is bolted onto the back of the generator. Anyway, I guess there's a leak. Here's a terrible look at Chrysler's original power steering gearbox. Oh, cloth wiring. How I love cloth wiring. Hey, there's a shiny new American-made voltage regulator on here. I brought options for power. That is your standard cruising model 6-volt battery. Of course, this car, being a 55, is wired 6-volt positive ground, so that's fun. Usually when I'm reviving something like this, I rip most of the electronic stuff off and I swap to 12 volts. But I'm not, emotionally prepared to do that in this case. I'm going to slap this battery in and see what happens. If we need a boost, I do have a 12-volt jump box. Huh. Something somewhere in the car is on. It's the brake lights. I don't know if that's a good sign or not. Oh boy. Signs of life. The amp gauge dropped. You can't really tell, but both headlights are lit up. That's very exciting. Both parking lights work too. I'm about ready to just hit the key and see if the starter will turn this engine over. Before I do that, I want to discuss something. There is a 100% chance that in the comments on this very video, people are going to ask why I didn't pull every single spark plug and dump oil down every single cylinder and let it soak into the rings. I'll tell you why. Because I've done this many, many, many times with engines that have sat longer than this one. You don't have to do that. The people saying that have watched a few too many episodes of Vice Grip Garage, I think. I hear it again and again. The rings are dry. You're gonna ruin that engine. Nothing is going to happen to this engine that hasn't already happened sitting for decades. But I will do you a favor. There's about a 0% chance this will make it to every cylinder, but I will dump some mystery oil down the thing. And with any luck, a little bit of that will find its way into those chambers, and it'll quiet the peanut gallery. Liquid cotton candy. If you don't know anything about 6-volt systems, well, there's a reason I delete them all the time. They're kind of terrible. Generally speaking, these things turn over like garbage on 6 volts, but let's see what we get. Wow, that's even worse than I expected. It lost power after that one little clunk, so this is definitely a battery cable issue. Probably that one. Guess that's just gonna happen every time. That's all we get? Yeah, we're gonna need more volts than that. There's also a really good chance this battery's total garbage. Two things. One, I figured out the brake light issue. The pedal just doesn't quite hit the switch they must have added up there. Originally, this thing would have had a hydraulic brake switch. Also, I think this is actually doing something, which is just crazy, but I can hear clunky noises in the back. That might be enough to do something, actually. Here's a first for the channel. Dual points. That's kind of good and bad news. The good news is dual points perform at higher RPM. They're great for performance uses. The bad news is twice the scrubbing and twice the wondering what the heck is wrong when this thing won't spark. You can probably tell there's like horrible powdery stuff on there. I'm going to clean these up and hopefully my efforts are rewarded with sparks coming out of the coil. The unfortunate thing here is testing my work is a little bit harder with dual points because both sets of points have to open to produce a spark. This is not convenient. Of course, the first generation Hemi's got the distributor here in the back like a small block and not conveniently located in the front like a later big block. Well, we've got ignition and I can tell you that two different ways. First, the amp gauge is diving when I turn the key on. And second, off camera, I shocked the crap out of myself. You're supposed to keep the camera rolling for things like that, but no. Oh, you saw me test the horn and be disappointed, but this works. Yeah, so I'm going to soldier on with the 6-volt battery. Just pour some fuel down the carb and see what happens. Note, I haven't done that thing you're supposed to do, which is unhook the line from the fuel tank. We'll get there. Come on, big money. This money isn't big enough. God, I hate 6-volt systems. do you like the smoke? Not from the exhaust, but from the battery terminal. I don't think this battery is actually any good, really. This is the one we took out of the 42 Dodge pickup. It was dead when it got here. We had this thing on the charger for like 4 hours today. It never did say it was like good. You can fire these things up on 12 volts. You know, give them a little bit of the good life. Ideally, we would disconnect the generator to do that because it may be very upset with that turn of events. Yeah, I'd kind of hate to fry that thing. We could also disconnect it at the voltage regulator. Yeah, let's do that. The basic idea here is we'll fire it on 12 volts and then we'll disconnect that and switch over to 6. Okay, that's bat. Arm, there we go. Ah! I had to do this recently on the 49 Studebaker I revived. Because with the generator connected, well, it started letting out the smoke on 12 volts. Not ideal. Most other things will be just fine on 12 volts short term. The starter won't care. Most of the light bulbs will probably survive, although I will refrain from activating them. Let's see what happens. Positive. Negative. Hopefully no smoke. I think we're good. Maybe. See? It loves 12 volts. For some reason the wipers turned on and they won't turn off. So that's cool. The good news is the wiper motor works. The bad news is it probably won't work for long. Anyway, more fuel. Whee! Okay, that was kind of a lot. That's my bad. Don't make me shock myself again. Yeah, that's where we're going. Maybe I'll actually check for visual spark coming out of the coil wire. That might be a good idea. I can tell you 100% it was sparking a minute ago. I got a comment recently insisting that I cannot check for spark simply by disconnecting the coil wire and setting it next to ground. What are you talking about? I've been doing that for years. It works great. Oh, you need a spark tester. No, you don't. You know what a spark plug does? It jumps the spark from the electrode to ground. So you just jump a spark from the wire off the coil to ground. It works great. You know I enjoy making these videos, but sometimes being on the internet, man. Anyway, let's see if this does sparks. Might be hard to see, but watch that gap there and I'll listen. Well, I didn't hear anything. No sparkies. So despite getting electrocuted, I'm gonna have to go in there and file the points more because it is not sparking. I'm not surprised, I'm just disappointed. Also, I imagine the expertly tuned ears amongst the viewership will have already noticed this thing's got a weak cylinder. It might come back after we get it to fire, but it might not. Oh, stop. Okay, at least this back set is good now. You can hear the zappies, and I don't know if you can see the zappies on the camera, but I'm seeing them occasionally. With a pair of screwdrivers with insulated handles, so I didn't get the crap shocked out of me this time, I was able to hold one set while scrubbing the other set, and vice versa. I've made sure both are grounding and both are opening to produce a spark. So we should be good now, I hope. I was doing the spark testing on 6 volts, but I'm gonna crank it over on 12 again because I really don't think that battery's gonna do much. That's cool. I don't think we had a good connection there. I just love the smoke billowing out of everywhere on this thing. Suppose I'll dump in a bit more fuel while I'm thinking about it too. Stay. Stay. God, that poor donkey. Every time. Come on. All right. Yeah, it's enough to do something. Yeah, whoa. Why not? Some of that even went in the carburetor. All right, this is it. I can feel it. Or whatever. Starter. It burbled a few times. It wants it. It's gonna go. I probably just flooded the ever-living crap out of it. I don't smell burning starter quite yet, so I think we're okay. Have you noticed? It already evened out. Sounds better. I do not want to ruin the starter in this thing. That would be bad. Seems really unlikely that it needs more fuel, but maybe I'll just give it more fuel. I am getting a little bit of smoke out of that breather, and that is a good sign. We're gonna get it. Now remember, the choke is stuck open, and that should be fine. We don't need any extra enrichment. There's plenty of fuel here. As I'm cranking it, I am modulating the throttle. Usually I've got it most of the way open, but I have tried shut. Oh! And part open as well. That was a lot. Okay. Well, that wasn't great, but it ran. Yeah, that's a lot of fuel. Either the timing is slightly advanced or, you know, the starter's already trying to die, which wouldn't be any great surprise. That is a running, what's it called? Firepower? This thing's thirsty. I need to work out some means of filling the bowls on the carburetor so I can be further disappointed when the idle circuits don't work. What are the chances the mechanical fuel pump works? I'm thinking low. I'll tell you right now, I have no interest in trying to run this thing on what I just smelled under that gas cap. And that shouldn't come as any surprise. It's been sitting 30-something years. Actually, it's only 29. That's bad math. I was 5 years old when this thing was parked. For science, I'm gonna see if this thing will fire up on that 6-volt battery now. I'm not banking on it. I'm gonna set this battery terminal on fire in a minute here. That's pretty much been my experience with 6 volts, always. Hence the 12-volt conversion, my favorite thing to do to one of these. Then they actually start. Anyway, I guess I'm gonna throw this in here. Giant 12-volt battery. My jump box is already half dead, which is not great, so this is what we got. Also, I dribbled some magic juice down the fuel pump on this thing, but I don't think it's gonna play ball, so I'm gonna end up putting the electric one on here, which is fine. With the 12-volt battery, I can actually run that, so that's the good news. Let's see if it'll fire again now. With a fuel supply, this thing will be a solid runner, guaranteed. So, to accomplish that, we'll use our trusty old, crappy, used Holly Red pump. Works pretty well. I already disconnected the line to the carburetor from the pump, so I could try and lubricate that thing. So it's as easy as doing that. And then running this ridiculously long line that just fell off into our gas can. Notice this isn't clamped. I never clamp the connections on these electric pumps, and they always work. Well, usually. The wire is too short to reach the other side. So I guess I'm going to employ the jump box to run this for now. Oh, this is getting ridiculous. But there's that. Pump positive, which is not the orange wire? Negative, which is the orange wire. I'm gonna run that hose into this giant, mostly empty fuel can. If this works, great, but I'm gonna have to find one that fits under the hood. Oh, dude. This can's full of chunks. I'm not gonna worry about that. Or the fact that there's no filter on this pump. I don't have time to worry about that. Go button on the pump. Oh! Remember how I said I never clamp these hoses and it's never been a problem? It's being a problem. There we go. Okay. Oh. The inevitable happened. The needle and seats are not happy. That's really cool. We'll let them soak and we'll let some of this evaporate, I think. What do you know about flame-broiled Hemis? I'll tell you what I know in a minute here. And we're just running on whatever went in the bowls before it overflowed everywhere. But it sounds pretty good. Well, good-ish. Is it gonna hold this time? Yes! Yes, I think it is. Oh, it's still flowing everywhere. Just less. Oh God, what was that? That ain't good. What was that? Okay, I believe the needle and seats are holding now. That'll often happen. When you first get gas in there, they will not be happy, but eventually they become happy. It's still overflowing inside a little bit, but it's better. Anyway, I don't know what that big after it shut off was. Not really excited about that, but I better start it again before it floods. Why? I said I was gonna burn this thing and I haven't done it yet. Oh. Okay. Despite the engine sounding more even than when I started, I think it's blowing some compression out the carburetor. And you can tell this is not 8 happy cylinders, so. Actually, it sounds pretty good now. That may be an intermittent issue. Probably just need to keep running it. I doubt it'll idle. Almost. Yes! That is an idling Hemi, or whatever it's called. There's even some exhaust making it back here. Not much. I'm sure you've noticed the smoke over here. That's not great. Yeah, so basically, it's absolutely mint. You know I have to try this. It's gonna run out of gas at any moment. Okay, transmission's definitely low, and there's more smoke happening. It's just the normal I've sat for 30 years and everything's burning off smell, so I'm good with that. Yeah, transmission might be a little low. Just a little. Considering this is with it off. I'm going to get you more stuff. Don't burst into flames. The day is getting a little long in the tooth, as it were, and I'm about out of time for this. So I'm gonna grab a funnel and some transmission fluid and something to air those front tires up with. I'm told they'll stay inflated for like an hour. Well, that's more than enough. You ever been airing up one of these portable air tanks and spend a few moments thinking about what would happen if it exploded right next to you? I have. Of course, low automatic transmission fluid is a completely typical thing to find when you're reviving a car. It is customary to check before you just drop it in gear, but I can't be bothered with such things. I dumped in 2 entire quarts of transmission fluid, and I think that will be fine. Of course, we use this Type F stuff. I've had some questions about that. That's been a speed secret known to Mopar guys for years now. The additive package in the Type F leads to firmer shifts, and firmer shifts are happy shifts. We've got a Lucas oil jug that Evan turned into a portable fuel reservoir, so I'm going to plumb that to our pump here, and hopefully it will draw from there despite having to go through this crazy curly Q. It's almost full, not running. I should just put in another half. Yep, here we go. Putting in another half. In the funnel, please. There you go. Should I just put the whole thing in? Probably, but then it might be critically overfull. Overfilling your transmission isn't good either, because then the fluid gets all frothy as it's picked up by the guts of the transmission. Bad stuff can happen. See if these tires will hold air. They should. They did, you know, at one time. These valve extensions used on the Imperials are really goofy. They don't actually have threads. The thing just kind of sits on there. Is it good that I can see into the sidewall on this tire? I'm going to choose not to worry about that for now. Have you ever seen that movie, Raise the Titanic, from the 80s? Terrible. Oh, mostly terrible. I mean, that guy tows the entire Titanic with his teeth. That's pretty cool. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get both tires up, but let's see. Oh, it's doing something. It's blowing dust out. Come on, dude, just get off the ground. Yes. Maybe we do have a show. All right, well, it's off the ground. And as I think I mentioned, I'm kind of out of time here, so that's going to have to be good enough. Don't leave that there. That's a bad idea. Ow. Okay. I don't know about you, but I have 100% faith in this vehicle's ability to like just drive out of this hole. So let's give that a shot. Oh, did you know right there is where I buried the 68 Imperial? Really funny that Tom put this here. I didn't turn on the fuel pump. That's going to be important. Of course, it's running on the jump box here, which is good and bad. If this thing starts blowing fuel everywhere, I'll have no way of knowing and no way to shut it off. Anyway, big money. Editor's note. I feel like it's important to mention that I lost some in-car footage from this little driving sequence. I said all kinds of profound things about how you shouldn't bet against a vintage Chrysler product, and I certainly never would. Also, I showed off the fact that the brake pedal does, in fact, do braking, which I still don't believe. The brake booster's bad, but that's not the point. All right, back to it. Okay, sure. It smokes like a chimney, and it smells terrible, inside and out. Especially out. Ugh. But this thing wants to live. It's awesome. I'm impressed. Are you impressed? I think the power steering's dead. It's probably just out of fluid, actually. I'm gonna put it here in Imperial parking. I wonder if Tom will notice. What a machine, man. What a machine. As you may well know if you're a car enthusiast like me, There are some less than stellar things happening with what's left of Chrysler Corporation these days. The continued existence of Chrysler itself as a brand isn't even certain at this point. All they sell is a minivan. Plymouth's been gone for decades now, and with the death of the third-gen Hemi, even Dodge is no longer what it has been for the last couple decades. I have faith they might turn that around, but that too is not for certain. In my little world, though, none of that matters. I'm happy to look back 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 decades to when Chrysler products were great, to when these Imperials were like the king of the hill as far as luxurious, awesome, technologically advanced cars go. I hope you enjoy this stuff. I put a lot of work into it, so yeah. I know I named the channel Dead Dodge Garage. That's a joke. I'm all about keeping these things alive or bringing them back to life. It's like my whole thing. I've been tempted by both of these cars. I could buy either one of them. The 68 would probably drive home, but the 55, look at it. It's just a magnificent machine. Don't worry about all the horrible rust holes and the fact that I didn't even show you half of them. At heart, I'm always going to be an A and B body guy, but there's something special about these giant Imperials. I think I need one in my life. Well, need is the wrong word. I'd still be much happier if this thing was a two-door, you know, a C300, but that's another story. Anyway, that's it for the Imperial for now. I'm certainly not promising to bring this thing home. It'll probably find a home elsewhere, but I could be inclined to wash it, dump some steering fluid in it, fix the brake lights, take it down the road. That could be fun. And right about that time, it will probably burst into flames. Because cloth wiring. I want to take this opportunity to quickly remind you that Dead Dodge Garage channel memberships are live. Over 50 people have already signed up. I very much appreciate that. If you want to get more involved and support the channel directly, please consider becoming a member. Unless you're on an iPhone, there's a join button under this very video right now. Or you can hop on your web browser, go over to my channel page, and hit join. If you don't want to become a member, no problem. My videos are always going to stay available to everyone. In any case, as ever, thank you very much for watching. And remember, it's not a Chrysler, it's an Imperial. Oh, and next time we revive that, if I can be bothered. What's the worst that could happen?